honey. What smells so good in here?
Oh, that would be our Christmas carpondro. I just put it in the oven. And honey, you know what? Speaking of cooking, I cannot wait to get into today's video and talk about diamond pythons. You know, we keep them way too warm in our collections. It's like we're cooking these poor animals.
Okay, wait. You're joking about having a carpondro in the oven, right?
Honey, just relax. I promise I'm going to take it out, okay? In like 2 more hours. Welcome to video number 32, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me today. And before we get into today's video, I want to show everybody, I finally got my last row of boafowl cages in from Jeff Roney over at Boafowl Plastics. So this room is completely done. I am out of space. I have, there's 20, 30, 6-inch enclosures, all arboreals, purchased by Specialty Enclosure Designs, and they all came installed with the radiant heat panels. If you're looking for cages from Jeff at Boafowl, just keep in mind, guys, Jeff hurt his shoulder. He's going to be out of commission for a while. If you've tried to go to his website, I think it's just boafowl.com, you'll notice that his website is down. But I spoke with Jeff, he's going to heal, and I promise you guys, he will be back in action. He's just going to be down for at least the next few months. Hey, and also on the topic of cages, for those of you who've been in arboreals for a long time, PVCcages.com, Jim Sharphorn's company. Jim has now officially closed down PVCcages.com, which is a real bummer because he's been around for so long. So at this point, if you're looking for arboreal cages, with Jeff being down at Boafowl and with no more PVC cages, I mean, I think Focus Cubed Habitats is, definitely a good option right now. So you should look into Focus Cubed Habitats with Steve and Ashley Howdy. The other thing I wanted to mention before we get into today's video is, actually, you know what? Check out this picture, guys, that I'm going to put up right now. That is a Western Sanzinia produced by my friend Paul Mitzelfeld. I saw this picture on Facebook. Paul had this litter of Westerns, I don't know, about, I'd say 3-4 months ago. I think there were 10 or 11 babies in the litter. Paul is a known Sanzinia hoarder, so I know he's going to hold back the whole litter, but when I saw this female that he produced, it was just so phenomenal to me. I thought you guys would really enjoy seeing it, so I wanted to make sure I put a picture up. So congratulations to you, Paul, on that. Also wanted to mention Fred Grunwald. Rest in peace, Fred Grunwald. Fred was a herper down in Florida. He's been in the hobby for many, many years. I did not know Fred personally. I never got a chance to meet him. I only know him through videos that many people feature him on YouTube. Seemed like a super nice guy, super passionate about the animals. And when I saw he passed away, it really bummed me out. So rest in peace, Fred Grunwald. And finally, in today's video, guys, I want to talk about diamond pythons. My goal is just to make keeping diamond pythons so less stressful and just make it so much easier for you guys and make it better for the diamond pythons. There's a lot of little nuances to keeping diamond pythons, and I promise you're going to want to watch today's video because there's a lot to learn about them, actually. And there's a lot of controversy when it comes to diamond pythons as well, especially when it comes to lineages. So today I plan to cover lineages as long as temperatures, as well as a touch on DPS.
Wait, DPS? Do you mean CPS?
No, honey, DPS is diamond python syndrome. DPS takes away your diamond pythons. CPS, well, they take away your children. But you know, before we get to the diamond python segment, I want to show you guys my baby green tree pythons that hatched out a couple months ago. I featured it in my last video, and I want to show you guys a difference between the ones that are feeding and the ones that are not feeding. Okay, so let's do that before we get to the diamond pythons. Honey, in show business, we call that a subtle tease. See, what I'm trying to do is get people to watch longer so they hang on and wait for the diamond python segment, right? That's what I'm trying to do. But honey, check this out, though. What do you think this is?
What the hell are you doing?
That's called a less subtle tease.
There's something so wrong with you.
You married me. Okay, guys, so these are the baby green tree pythons I hatched. I want to say they hatched out in October, and I could talk on this subject for hours, but I know people have questions all the time about when do you start force-feeding baby chondros when they are not feeding, and should you feed them pinky heads? How do you do it? So I thought I'd cover it really quickly as that. You can see this animal right here has about 10 to 12 meals in it. Just had its second shed, obviously kicking butt. This baby over here has right now about 3 or 4 pinky heads in it. So obviously this one needs some work. So when an animal's not feeding, does it mean it's a terrible feeder and it's something genetic? Absolutely not. It doesn't mean that at all. Because that baby that's not feeding, I guarantee if it was in the wild, or if I threw it a baby frog or a little gecko, that little baby that's not feeding for me right now would eat instantly. It's just not wanting, commercially raised rodents, and that's the problem I'm having right now. So what am I doing with a non-feeding baby? Can I just constantly feed it pinky heads until it takes off on its own? No, you can't do that. The one thing I can guarantee you guys, if you feed a baby green tree python only pinky heads, and you just do that constantly over, maybe one every week for several months, the baby's going to die. It's just going to fade away. There's not enough nutritional value in a pinky head. You have to get it on full pink. So what I do is I will feed it pinky heads every like 4 days, and I'll do that, and then I'll try feeding it again as normal with either an unscented pinky mouse. I'll try frozen thawed. I'll try live pinky mice. I'm scenting with chick down. I'm scenting with gecko scent. I'm scenting with frog scent. I'm trying all the tricks that we all know. But the reality is, I'll keep feeding it pinky heads until, you know, probably 4 to 6 times, and then after that point, I'll start force feeding it 1 to 2 day old pinkies. And I promise you, just by doing that and being gentle with it, it will take off on its own. Just when you think they're not going to eat, and you think they're going to die, and you get super frustrated, I promise you, they will eat. Unless it's some weird anomaly, I've really never had one not eat for me. I actually would show you guys right now how to force feed it a pinky head, but I'm pretty sure my wife might vomit, so I don't want to do that right now. And as far as feeding pinky heads, there's 2 ways to do it. The way I prefer, that works for me, is I take the pinky head and I literally take the animal, I open its mouth open very gently, I put the pinky head in the animal's mouth, and usually within a few minutes, 15, 20 minutes, I just put it back in the enclosure. It will eat the pinky head on its own. The idea behind the pinky head, it's so small the animal cannot get it out of its mouth. Another way to feed your animal pinky's head is to get these little like shish kebab skewers. Vladimir Odenchenko over at the Bushmaster farm over in Indonesia used to do this with his baby chondros that wouldn't feed on a regular basis, and it worked really well for him. He would just basically take a pinky head and through the neck of the pinky head, put the pinky on the skewer, and he would heat it up slightly to get the baby to strike, and then the baby would just strike the pinky head and hopefully grab it, and then it would be less stressful for the animal because you did not have to lift it out of its enclosure and put the pinky head manually into its mouth, and it would just grab the pinky head off this little skewer. And the reason for the skewer is just that you can get your hand far enough away from it so the heat coming off your hand will not confuse the baby chondro with the heat coming off the pinky mouse, and it will hit the right target, and that's the idea behind the skewer. The other reason is that as soon as that pinky grabs the pinky head off the skewer, it's just automatically going to release because it's not on here that tightly at all. So that's the whole idea behind it. I don't like it as much because sometimes I find if the baby green tree python does not hit the pinky head correctly on the skewer, it winds up just knocking the pinky head off the skewer, and you have to keep putting it back on, and it's just a little bit of a pain in the butt. So I just manually put the pinky head in the chondro's mouth. So anyway, I'll keep you guys posted on this baby. I'm sure it will take off eventually. It looks great. It has great body weight on it. When you compare it to the one that's not feeding, it doesn't look great, but I promise you, it will take off for me. And again, it's not a genetic thing. It doesn't mean it's a bad feeder. It just means that it doesn't want commercially raised rodents. But I tell you right now, if I threw a little frog in there or gecko, it would nail it instantly. Guys, how amazing is this animal? This is a Gothenburg diamond line, Gothenburg zoo line from Sweden. I don't know much about this line. I featured it in a previous video, but the first thing I want to start talking about with diamond pythons are the diamond python lines. But actually, before I get into any of that, I want to thank 2 guys tremendously. These guys are subject matter experts with all things diamond pythons. The first one is Joshua Easter. Josh, you've heard his name on my channel before, and Josh is just a modern day he's our expert, subject matter expert in today's herp world when it comes to diamond pythons. Anything I want to know about diamond pythons, I go right to Josh. I know he's going to have the answer for me. The other gentleman's name is Dave Sutton, and Dave's out on the west. Dave's a low-key guy, but when you've seen like the Stardust diamonds, which we're going to get into later, and the reduced pattern diamonds, Dave actually is the first gentleman to actually produce those animals in his collection here in the U.S. He had about 20 pair of adult diamonds breeding at one time, and Dave just really knows his stuff. And again, a tremendous help. So Dave, thank you so much for helping me with this segment on diamond pythons. Honey, as much as Dave is a nice guy, but I believe he still would not let me come to his house. He told me he has a closed collection. I think it's because I'm from New Jersey, but that's another story here or there. So let's start talking about diamond python lines right now. Again, this is a Gothenburg zoo line out of Sweden. I don't know much about it. I know Martin Roseman here in the States has an animal from this line as well. My friends in Australia, my friends in Germany, maybe you guys can shed some light on this line for me. I don't know much about it, okay? Let's talk about, I have to mention one other thing, Gary Valley. How can I mention diamond pythons without Gary Valley? Gary Valley's a longtime diamond python breeder. He's out of diamond pythons now here in the States. He's retired, but when it comes to guys like Dave Sutton, I know he was Dave's mentor. I think he was Josh's mentor as well. So again, Gary Valley and Joshua Easter, Dave Sutton, these guys are true experts when it comes to diamond pythons. So I'm going to actually put her away right now because it's nighttime, and even though she's so gentle, she's in feeding mode, and I want to get into diamond python lines, but I'm going to put her back first. Okay, diamond python lines they remind me very much of green tree python localities at this point over here in the United States, because when you're buying green tree python localities, unless you're really there to see where the animal's from and collect it yourself over in Indonesia, you're really taking the word of mouth on the seller. It's the same thing with diamond python lines at this point. I mean, we know there are 4 definitive diamond python lines here in the U.S. that we could all agree on. The first is the Gary Val line. Every time you purchase an animal, a diamond python from somebody here in the U.S., I guarantee it's going to have Gary Val line in it. Most likely it's going to have San Diego Zoo line in it. The third line you're going to hear about over here in the U.S. is the KC Lasik line. But from what I understand, those animals are very difficult to come across. I believe Josh Easter has 1 lone male in his collection. And I think that's pretty much it. In other words, you know, you might see the KC Lasik line listed on the husbandry card when you buy a baby. But as far as, you know, pure animals, I think Josh Easter may have the only KC Lasik animal around at this point. The fourth and final line every diamond python enthusiast can agree on is the Riverbanks Zoo line. Riverbanks sounds like it should be over in Australia or something, but the Riverbanks Zoo is actually in South Carolina. Those animals from the Riverbanks Zoo line were originally imported from Perth, Australia. It was a pair of siblings, and those animals have been greatly inbred, which is why I just don't think you see the Riverbanks Zoo stock around much these days. So again, when you're talking about diamond python lines, the 2 most common lines you're going to see on a regular basis that we can all agree are still definitive lines here in the U.S. are the San Diego Zoo line and the Gary Val line. Okay, these last 3 lines are the ones who are somewhat controversial here in the States. There was a gentleman by the name of Geb Bailey. There was a Geb Bailey line of diamonds. I know Dave Sutton had mentioned his line of diamonds to me, Geb Bailey. I don't know the origin of Geb's animals. I don't know if they're around. I have no idea what happened to them. If anybody's out there who happens to know what Geb Bailey animals or know what happened to them, that'd be great. You can comment down below. The other line we talked about is that Gothenburg Zoo line from Sweden. I showed you that animal earlier. I don't know if that's a real line or not. Again, if you guys have any input with that line out there, please share it with me in the comments down below. But the third line that seems to be the most controversial line was the Cypress Creek line. It was a gentleman by the name of Tom Carlton owned Cypress Creek, and his animals were supposedly directly brought over from Australia. I'm not sure how that all occurred, how that happened. Depending on who you speak with, I know with Dave Sutton, for example, Dave very much believes in the Cypress Creek line. He had Cypress Creek animals. In fact, the first Stardust, the first reduced pattern diamonds actually originated, I believe, from a Cypress Creek animal. If I spoke to Josh Easter about that, I don't remember if I spoke to him about it or not. I'm not sure how Josh feels about the Cypress Creek line. But again, so as far as those last 3 lines I just mentioned, Geb Bailey, Cypress Creek, and the Gothenburg Zoo, those 3 are up for discussion. I know specifically with that Cypress Creek line, if you're around a bunch of real diamond heads and you mention that, it's like they're like heads are going to explode. So that's the most controversial line. But depending on who you speak to, I'm not saying it's not a real line or not. Many seem to believe it's an actual pure line of diamond pythons, while some others believe it's just simply not. Next thing I want to focus on, guys, is temperature. That is the key thing when you're talking about diamond pythons. And regardless of what you're talking about with other diamond python keepers, you know, as far as lineage or if DPS exists or not, the one thing we can all agree on is that we keep these animals, especially here in the States, way too warm. By the way, this is a 2021. This is a reduced pattern diamond python female produced by my friend Martin Roseman. I'm going to get more into reduced pattern versus Stardust. Is there a difference? Genetics, we're going to get into that in a second. But temperatures, guys, here's where we want to be. We want to be, for your adult diamonds, 77 to 80 degrees. They are a temperate species. They do not need heat above that. You can give them a basking site. In fact, it's beneficial to give your adult diamonds a basking site up to 85, 86 degrees, but not for really more than 8 hours at a time. As babies, you can raise them in a rack. They will be fine. Males and females can be raised in a rack, but when they hit that 18-month to 2-year mark, at that point, you should probably put them in a cage. And the reason you keep them in a cage as opposed to a rack, I'm going to get into that right now. Okay, so why is a cage so much better than a rack for keeping diamond pythons? Well, we're specifically going to talk about males here. Males need to be very cooled. If you're going to breed your diamond pythons, you need to bring them down to like the low 50s in order to get high fertility rate with your male diamond pythons. Can you achieve low 50s in a rack? You can, but the problem is in a rack there's belly heat, or even if it's in a cage with belly heat. And the problem with belly heat is a male will lay on it all day, and we know that belly heat in male diamond pythons kills off sperm in diamond pythons, causing a higher infertility rate. So if you're keeping your male diamond pythons in a rack with belly heat or in a cage with belly heat, and you're getting a high, lots of infertile eggs, or you're not getting any eggs, I'd be willing to bet that if you move that animal into a cage with a better temperature gradient and you can provide above the tank heating as opposed to the belly heat, I'd be willing to get a much better rate of fertility with your eggs with that particular male diamond python. Another thing worth mentioning as far as heat is that it's not only male's fertility that is impacted by too much heat with diamond pythons. There is something called DPS, I've alluded to it earlier, diamond python syndrome. What that really is it seems to, diamond pythons seem to lose their muscle tones as they get a little bit older. Is it because of too much heat? We really don't know. In fact, it's really up for discussion, DPS, whether it really exists or not. If you read on some of the Aussie forums, they'll mention that, hey, even people keeping diamond pythons in outdoor enclosures have run into, DPS, poor muscle tone in these animals. In Nick Mutton's book and Justin Juliander's book, The Complete Carpet Python, they do reference DPS. So again, depending on if you're reading a forum or you're reading, Nick's book, you're going to get different stories on DPS. But I think the bottom line here is that too much heat for diamond pythons, whether male or female, can be detrimental to the species. Blushing, by the way, has nothing to do with temperatures with diamond pythons. You guys know what the term blushing means? I actually never heard the term before Dave Sutton had mentioned to me. For those of you out there with adult diamonds, a lot of times when you watch them eat and as the rat is going down their throat, you'll see that whole area around their throat becomes inflamed. It looks so pink, it looks red the first time you see it. It's kind of alarming. I think that's a unique trait to diamond pythons. And another unique trait to diamond pythons is, I think besides king cobras, diamond pythons are actually the only other snake that builds nests. So if you see that blushing going on, that pink or all that red around your diamond python's throat, that has nothing to do with your enclosure being too warm. That's just simply part of being what diamond pythons do. And I know I keep referring to over-the-tank lights as far as heating that's better than belly heat, but what I'm really referring to are basking lights. Josh Easter made that point to me specifically, that to him, basking lights are the best thing you could use for diamond pythons. Far better than radiant heat panels. I'm not really sure what the difference is between those two heating elements, but according to Josh, it's far more beneficial to use a basking light as opposed to a radiant heat panel. I know a lot of us don't have that option to use a basking light. I don't have that option, but I can tell you that based on making this video and speaking to different people, I'm not happy with the way I'm currently keeping my diamond pythons, and I am going to make some modifications on my end and get rid of the belly heat in their enclosures. One other thing to mention I thought was really interesting that my friend Dave Sutton shared with me in regard to above the tank heating as opposed to belly heat is on several years when he had babies that hatched out, diamond python babies, the ones that were not feeding, what he decided to do is he removed them from the rack and he took those babies and he put them into like 5.5 gallon or 10-gallon fish tanks, clear glass, traditional 10-gallon fish tanks. Put a screen top on them, and he put it above the tank heating as opposed to the belly heat, and every one of those babies, he told me, would eat every single time. So yeah, a good portion of these babies will eat in a rack, as we traditionally keep our baby pythons here in the States. But just if you're out there and you have some baby diamond pythons and are not feeding for you, I'm going to try it with carpet pythons as well. He suggests taking them out and putting them in a 10-gallon tank with above the tank heating, like a basking light on top of that tank. And he just had great success, so you guys could try that out and let me know what you think of it. Before making this video, when I saw diamond pythons that were reduced pattern animals, or what they called stardust animals, by the way, the name stardust originated over in Germany, I thought that was the same animal, but after speaking with Dave Sutton, Dave tends to believe that this would be the stardust. Okay, you can see that kind of stripe going along the vertebrae with the granite on the sides, and this is a reduced pattern animal. It's just that speckling all along the animal. There's not really any set stripe there. Dave seems to feel that this is a codom trait, the patternless, with the stardust being the super form of that. Dave's the first guy to originate this trait here in the States. He had 7 babies born from one clutch of animals many years back. So he reserves the right to call them what they want. But as far as whether they're codominant, recessive, I think the jury's kind of still out on that. It could be a polymorphic trait in the sense that there's just varying degrees of pattern on this animals. I'm not really sure. But listen, what I really want to come out of this video is we could all agree or disagree on the different diamond python lines here in the States. And we could agree or disagree whether diamond python syndrome actually exists. If it's not something that just has to do with parasites or respiratory infections. And we could debate whether, what this is codom or whether this is recessive or just some other gene going on here with the stardust animals and the reduced pattern animals. But the one thing I really want to make clear in this video is that we're keeping these animals too warm here, at least in the States we are. And that's what I want the common theme to be. Let's just start keeping our diamond pythons much cooler, 77 to 80 degrees. That's, again, it's just going to be far more beneficial to the animals. But in any case, I love these animals, and I plan to breed a... this is a future pairing for me, a reduced pattern with the stardust, and I plan to do this pairing, and as you can see, she's pretty small in the next few years. We'll see what happens with it. And finally, you can't talk about diamond pythons unless you also include diamond python intergrades or hybrids. Diamond pythons actually do hybridize with carpet pythons in New South Wales. Diamond pythons, they breed naturally with migdali, which are the coastal carpets. But a lot of people look down on them. I think really what it comes down to is that as long as the seller is honest. I love the idea of diamond intergrades, and I'll tell you how it all started here in the States. Diamond pythons were so expensive here in the States years ago. I believe this is a reduced pattern jaguar diamond python. I produced these animals, and that's just a reduced pattern intergrade. So these are both 75% plus actually diamond, and then part gamma jungle or gamma jaguar as well. So these should be pretty amazing as adults. So I'm going to hold both of these back. But I think diamond python intergrades started here in the States just because diamond pythons were so expensive back in the 90s. I want to say a pair was like $7,500, which, you know, you put that in today's dollars. I don't know. I don't have a calculator in front of me, but it's probably like billions of dollars. But again, people poo-poo them, and I understand why people don't like hybrids. As you guys know, I make jokes about chondros all the time because, you know, I just think I don't like them. But in any event, I think as long as the seller is honest and they're representing them honestly as diamond intergrades, I personally don't have a problem with them. And it's just, the irony here is just like with real diamonds, you can't really tell the difference between a real diamond and like a cubic zirconium. You can't tell the difference between a real diamond and a 75% sometimes. And it's, honey, it reminds me when I bought your ring, you know, and it looks so
What?
real. What?
What?
What? Guys, thanks so much for sticking with me if you made it to this point. It's a long video, but diamond pythons are awesome. There's a lot of information on diamond pythons out there, and I want to make sure that we're doing these animals justice and keeping them the way that we're supposed to keep them. So it's a silver savu girl. She gave me some babies last year. I'm hoping she goes again for me this year. But listen, everybody out there, have a wonderful holiday. Happy New Year, and I look forward to seeing everybody in the new year. Who has the best YouTube channel? Me